Welcome to episode number 068 of Something Else with Arya and Not KJ. Feast your ear holes on this week's episode as we take a look at Mid-South Wrestling from December 16th, 1982. My name is Arya, and welcome to the show. So, like I said, this week, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about Mid-South Wrestling as we always do on this here show. Hope everybody had a good holiday. Hopefully nobody did anything stupid on Black Friday. I'm actually recording this before either Thanksgiving or Black Friday, but I'm sure like there is every year, there'll be hundreds of news stories about people doing something stupid on Black Friday. Personally, I've never really gone out for Black Friday. Whatchamacallit? So I don't have a good Black Friday story to tell. I can tell you that I think people are a little crazy. I think it's a little weird that on Thursday, on Thanksgiving, everybody stops and gives thanks for what they have. And then on Friday, we go kill each other to try to get some cheap crap. Yeah. So that's my thoughts on Thanksgiving and Black Friday. And I'll be back in a couple of weeks to put Christmas down while I'm at it. By the way, happy holidays for every single holiday that you could possibly celebrate in December and early January. Remember, people, there's more than one. So if you're going to whine about how we're having a war on Christmas, just please, just fuck off. Like, there's no fucking war on Christmas. We're trying to be nice to everybody. And, I will sit here and tell you happy holidays until my head falls off, and I will do it especially at the people who get extra pissy about it. So there's that. So anywho, we're talking about Mid-South Wrestling, December 16th, 1982, from the Irish McNeil Boys Club in Shreveport, Louisiana. Let's go to the intro of this week's show with Boyd Pierce and today's guest host, the Cowboy, Bill Watts.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Mid-South Wrestling Television. I'm your host, Boyd Pierce, and as usual, lots of exciting action. Popular Chavo Guerrero is here. The big Ugandan warrior, Kamala, will be on this week's card. It'll be headlined by a Louisiana Heavyweight Championship match as Hacksaw Jim Duggan defends his coveted title and belt against the challenge of the man from Roanoke, Virginia, Mr. USA, Tony Atlas. Tag team action, a non-title bout. It'll be Matt Bourne and Ted DiBiase, the Mid-South Tag Team title holders, against Mr. Wrestling 2 and Stagger Lee. Also, Mr. Olympia is here against gorgeous Gino Hernandez. Lots of great action. The man to my left, who needs no introduction to Mid-South fans, whether it's in the ring or out, Cowboy Bill Watts, our guest commentator.
Well, Boyd, it should be an exciting evening. Some great bouts. Tony Atlas and Hacksaw Duggan for that Louisiana title, and, of course, the non-title tag match. And later on, Paul Bosch, the preeminent promoter from Houston, Texas, and great commentator, a man who's been in broadcasting for 50 years, will join you here. But it gives me a lot of pleasure to be back here, and I'm kind of a spokesman right now for Mr. Wrestling 2. People have been noticing how nervous and edgy and upset he is. He's made a couple of comments in the ring, but this is the type of thing that's been going on for Wrestling 2, this mental mind game, this defiling of similar equipment to his. Somebody has copied his equipment and they're defiling it. It's almost like a voodoo type thing or a witch doctor type thing. And you can see here it said, Mr. 2, have a good hard look and remember when. Something out of his past. And of course they've taken this mannequin, covered it with a mask similar to Wrestling 2's, wrapped it in gauze with the crimson in front signifying a bad injury. So this is what has got Wrestling 2 so upset. He doesn't know the direction, the input, or the thrust, or who it is. And I just want to say that it's really low for somebody to have to stoop like this. This is supposed to be a man's business, where if you've got a beef with somebody, you step out and you take them on one-on-one and settle it. And whoever it is, be warned, and also come on out and state your case right here with Grizzly Smith. He'll put you right in the ring with Wrestling 2, and you can do whatever you're man enough to do.
And the first match is in the ring. Let's go for the introduction and Reeser Bowden.
Okay, so today we got some big ass matches this week. Louisiana champion Jim Duggan puts the title on the line against Tony Atlas. We're going to have a non-title match with Ted DiBiase and Matt Bourne versus Mr. Wrestling 2 and Stagger Lee. Plus, we're going to have Mr. Olympia versus gorgeous Gino Hernandez. So we got 3 big matches coming up right here on Mid-South Wrestling this week, or at least 3 matches that we're promoting as big this week. Unfortunately, we're also going to have Paul Bosch doing his boring-ass commentary this week, which I'm sure will excite, the 3 people out there who enjoy Paul Bosch's commentary. I am not one of them. I don't know. It's like I just think, especially, on this show, where even on days where we have bad guest commentators, like Bob Roop gets a lot of crap from people, that say that he's bad at commentary. I disagree. I find Bob Roop to be great at it, to be perfectly honest. But like even going back, like, because we've had, we run the gamut of guest commentators this year. Babyface Ted DiBiase before this is probably, the dullest of the commentators that we've had. Or oh my God, I don't remember his name or what TV station he was from, but there was a guy who was the manager of one of the TV stations here at that cover Mid-South Wrestling. He did commentary the one week. That sucked. But Paul Bosch is the worst of anybody who is being promoted as great. And sadly, when they keep talking about the dean of wrestling commentators, the first name that pops in my head is Gordon Soley, and sadly, we're not getting Gordon Soley on this show. Anywho, so more on the Mr. Wrestling 2 situation. Bill Watts had a bloody mask, or at least he had a Mr. Wrestling 2 mask with some gauze wrapped around it that looked bloody, and a note that said, Mr. 2, have a good hard look and remember when. Now, personally, I think it would be pretty easy to figure out who the hell did this. You just take everybody in the locker room and judge their handwriting and base their handwriting off that. Hell, at the end of the day, even if you can't force them to write a paragraph out, at the end of the fucking day, every single one of them signed their paycheck, and, just compare the signatures on the paychecks to the handwriting that wrote out this note, and voila, we have our answer as to who is sending these threats. Now, Bill Watts points out that, instead of wrestling Mr. Wrestling 2 like a man, they're just sitting here and playing mind games. And, wrestling is a man's sport, except those times we have women wrestling. Then it's a woman's sport, but this is a man's sport. And if you have a beef with somebody, you get in the ring and fight them like a man, unlike that coward that's playing mind games here with Mr. Wrestling 2. So let's go to the ring for what's not a dream match, but is definitely a match that could be classified as, hey, I didn't know these 2 ever wrestled. Chavo Guerrero versus Marty Lundy. And we've seen this now a couple times with Double A, Arn Anderson. Him being an enhancement talent here on Mid-South gives you a lot of matches where you would normally say, hey, what if these 2 wrestled? And it turns out they did. They actually wrestled. And I would say this would qualify as one of them. Now, I wouldn't call this a dream match by any stretch of the imagination, but if you had made me bet my life on whether or not Chavo Guerrero Sr. ever wrestled Arn Anderson, I'd be dead right now. So we have a match coming up here. Kamala is going to be in action later on in the show, and he's going to be wrestling an enhancement talent that we've had a couple times on the show named Lester Parks. Now, why am I randomly bringing this up in the middle of a Marty Lundy Chavo Guerrero match? Because so did Bill Watts, and he's got something to say about this unusual match coming up.
Unusual match coming up, Boyd, and we'll be revealing it as we go on. As Lester Parks is going to wrestle Kamala, the Ugandan warrior that's now leashed by Skandor Akbar. But Akbar has paid this man, Lester Parks, a bonus to wear a mask in that match. And in talking to Skandor Akbar, I said, that's a little bit ridiculous. Everybody knows who Lester Parks is. He said, that has nothing to do with it. He said, when you have a savage like Kamala, small things mean a lot to him. He likes to, beating a man is not the most important thing. He wants something to show him the victory. He said, I've got this man putting his mask on, and I've told Kamala if he beats him, he can tear the mask off. Well, you can figure Akbar to come out with some devious, diabolical plan in order to train this big savage, go after the mask. And we know it could be the mask of Stagger Lee, because I'm sure Ted DiBiase has offered a ton of money to reveal Stagger Lee's identity to force a forfeit on the North American title. Or could it be Wrestling 2's mask or Mr. Olympia's mask?
So that is an interesting turn of events here. So we've been telling the story lately with Kamala wanting trophies and going after men wearing masks. And we put a job under mask, last week, the week before, as El Silencio. And now it's just, now we're just doing the angle where we're just going to flat out say, hey, Kamala's wrestling these jobbers. And so Skandor Akbar is going to pay these jobbers extra money to wear a mask and wrestle Kamala. Now, we'll get into this a little bit more next week, but I would like to think that after you've seen it once, if you're a enhancement talent sitting in the back and you've seen what happens one time, why the hell would you accept this for the second time? This really feels like something that should be a one and done situation, because nobody is stupid enough to want to do it the second time. But spoiler alert, this is not the only time this happens. So back to our exciting match that, hey, it's Bill Watts. Why should we ever talk about what's going on in the ring? Marty missed what was called the big score, which is Watts speak for a middle rope headbutt. Chavo used this, she calls that the rear view, to send Arn outside before using a plancha. If you remember, like 6-7 weeks ago, the first time Chavo was on the show and did a plancha and Bill Watts marked the fuck out, this was not the giant mark out moment, because unfortunately Bill Watts has now seen it. So I guess Chavo's going to have to come up with a new giant move to get Watts to mark out again. But Chavo then won with a middle rope missile drop kick and a running senton. So Chavo Guerrero 1, Arn Anderson 0. Let that show in the record books. We then get our unusual match we've been talking about. It is Kamala with Friday and General Skandor Akbar versus Lester Parks. Even though he's wearing a mask, Parks' expression clearly states, I can't believe I'm doing this shit. The good news is Reeser has stopped introducing Kamala as 6'8", because, as we've pointed out every time he has ever mentioned this, Reeser is not 6'10", and he has 2 inches on Kamala. Kamala has the mask of El Silencio on his spear that he took 2 weeks ago. So there answers the question I was talking about, what was last week or the week before. 2 weeks ago was when he fought El Silencio and took his mask. Still have no idea who El Silencio is. It's ultimately not really that important here, folks. This was slightly longer than the usual Kamala squash match. As this week, the match actually goes longer than Kamala's pre-match introduction, where he removes all of his accoutrements and his rings on his face. I should point out that once again, and I don't think this is ever going to stop for as long as he wears a nose ring, Kamala trusts this man to remove all of his accoutrements, his earrings. He takes his spear, he takes all that stuff, but he does not trust this man to remove his nose ring, and will, stop him and do it himself. By the way, Kamala won the match with 2 splashes to the back. Kamala did rip the mask off, and oh my God, it's Lester Parks. I did not see that coming. Lester Parks was the man under the mask this entire time. What is going on? So now Kamala has a second mask on his trophy stick. Now time for a non-title match between almost every champion in the company. It's tag team champions Ted DiBiase and Matt Bourne versus North American champion Stagger Lee and Mississippi champion Mr. Wrestling 2. Man, oh man, Maddie, why isn't Stagger Lee teaming up with his normal, I mean Junkyard Dog's normal partner, Mr. Olympia? As we've been talking about lately, they have pretty much abandoned all pretense that Stagger Lee isn't Junkyard Dog. And the story is that it's up to the heels to prove it. You know, like at this point, like I said, they did that stupid thing at the Superdome where they unmasked Junkyard Dog, and suddenly, before the mask comes off, Boyd Pierce stands up and turns his back to the crowd so he can't witness it. And the cameramen go away and aren't taking pictures at ringside. And there's no video of the match. It's just continuously, ridiculous here. Now, Watts says he does not blame Boyd Pierce for turning his back on the match of the Superdome when DiBiase ripped Stagger Lee's mask off, which is just hilarious because that's the first person I would blame. Watts turns his attention to the two situation and basically blames every single heel in Mid-South and says it could be them that did it, which, I know it's 1982 and not 2023, but that pretty much will always tip your hand that none of the people he talked about as doing it actually are behind it. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. The baby faces have literally zero trouble with the champs, and the faces shine for several minutes until DiBiase attacks two from behind. And we're going to play the audio of the finish. We're going to go to that right now.
It's a tag to Stagger Lee. Stagger Lee's in the ring. Matt Bourne, Stagger Lee and Matt Bourne legally in the ring, but DiBiase's in. All four of them are in. Referee Ralph Neely having a hard time containing it. You can understand why. Double clothesline. Matt Bourne's on the floor. Referee Neely putting two out. The crowd's hollering, warning Ralph Neely that Neely caught him. Neely caught him and made him get off the top rope. That would have been illegal, but now DiBiase is going for Stagger Lee's mask, but wrestling to decapitated him with that devastating knee lift. Now he's illegal in the ring. Bourne came for the top rope, but almost up to Stagger Lee, caught him a right. A victory for the team of Stagger Lee and Mr. Wrestling 2. A convincing, resounding, the people to their feet. Boyd Pierce, a great bout. Listen, 2-2-2.
Tremendous.
And Stagger Lee.
And coming up next, the Louisiana heavyweight title, Hacksaw Duggan defending against Mr. USA Tony Atlas after this important word.
All right. So Stagger Lee does get the hot tag. We break down into a four-way. Bourne tries coming off the top rope, but the referee forces him down, which I don't know. That still seems like, that he's pushing his, responsibilities here. Like, yeah, he's responsible for calling and abiding by the rules and enforcing the rules. But if Matt Bourne's just going to flagrantly break the rules, it's not the referee's job to stop him from doing it. It's the referee's job to warn him and then, end the match if need be. Like, you're not going to watch, football and and one of the players goes to blindside the quarterback or run with his head and spear the guy, and the referee's not going to stop him and say, "Hey, don't you spear him. Don't you do that." No, the referee's going to let it happen and then throw the flag when it does. But anywho, I'm sure if you ask Bill Watts, he'll try telling you how, back in his day, kid, that's not what happened. But back in his day, kid, that is what happened. Anywho, after the referee forced Matt Bourne at the top rope, DiBiase goes up to Stagger Lee's mask, So 2 runs in and decapitates Ted DiBiase with a running knee lift. The referee is distracted again, so Bourne goes off. So Bourne goes up top again. This time he comes off, but he comes off into a punch to the gut by Stagger Lee. And that punch to the gut, by the way, was enough to do it because Stagger Lee made the cover. And with 2 cutting off Ted DiBiase, Stagger Lee got the 1, the 2, and yes, my friends, he even got the 3 count. So Stagger Lee and Mr. Wrestling 2 have won the match. They have pinned the champions in a non-title match. What does this mean for the future? Does that mean they're gonna get a title match soon? Yes, it does, but we're gonna have to wait and see when that happens. And it may happen sooner than you think here, folks. So we're going to commercial, and we're going to come back with what is theoretically the introduction of our Louisiana title match.
And now a title match for the Louisiana Heavyweight Championship. This event...
Let me say one thing. Hacksaw Duggan, the thing about you, brother, you need to learn some respect. Now you come out here and you talk about a lot of people and you say you got the dog down. Well, I'm going to do one thing, brother. I come down here to whoop you for JYD. So every time I punch you in them big old lips of yours, you think about JYD. Let me tell you something, Atlas. Hacksaw Duggan's not a hard man to find. I'm right here in this ring right now. And I think all them big puff muscles you got on your arms are nothing but garbage. And I know that this big... Is this for that belt? Is this for that belt? Well, I don't mean no harm or nothing, sir, but will you please just move on out the way?
Now you have it. Tony Atlas getting a shot at the Louisiana Heavyweight Championship belt.
So Reeser attempts to introduce the match, but Atlas grabs the mic from him and talks about, he wants to talk about respect. And despite the fact that he just disrespected Reeser by not allowing him to do his job, he wants to talk about respect, and he wants to talk about how he's going to punch Jim Duggan in the lips in honor of Junkyard Dog. So that's the plan. He's going to punch Jim Duggan in the lips for Junkyard Dog. That's so something of him. Duggan makes fun of Atlas's muscles and calls them garbage. And then Atlas asks Reeser to leave the ring so the match can start. Earth to Tony Atlas, the match would have started about 45 seconds ago if you wouldn't have stopped Reeser from doing his introduction. Because in case this is the first time you ever watched wrestling, what basically happens is Reeser Bowden, who's our venerable ring announcer for this week's show, he introduces the man to the left, he introduces the man to the right, and then the referee rings the bell. All in all, it takes around 15 seconds. However, when you interrupt him and take his microphone and don't allow him to actually make the introductions, instead, it might take an extra minute, like it did here. And yeah. So the match begins, and this seriously happened. Now, I want you might be sitting here, you might be listening to this show, and you might say, you know what? AEW is the most unbelievable wrestling company in the world. These wrestlers, they don't know what they're doing. They're not believable. They're too childish. Nobody would believe that this would actually happen in a real fight. And it's not like the good old days of back, in 1982, and Bill Watts made out. Bill Watts would never allow shenanigans in one of his title matches on TV. What the hell, dude, right? So the match begins with Jim Duggan and Tony Atlas going to their bellies and having an arm wrestling match. You heard me right. They went to their bellies and had an arm wrestling match, which, by the way, this was not only encouraged by the referee, it was allowed. And yes, I said that backwards on purpose. The referee refereed the arm wrestling match, which, by the way, was a non-title match. So that's one thing we got on, current day wrestling, because if Russo was around, that would have been for the Louisiana title, because Atlas won like 10 or 12 times really quickly, just bam, 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 put Duggan's hand down. And shockingly, being shown that he's a worse arm wrestler than Tony Atlas pissed off Jim Duggan, and the body wrestling began. Now, I don't want to spoil things for anybody. I understand, this is, 41-year-old wrestling shows. 40 years, 11 months, 1 week ago. But I understand that, and I hope everyone is sitting down. I hope you've grabbed your favorite stuffed animal and you're holding it tight before I tell you what I'm about to tell you. Okay, everybody else set now? So this match with Jim Duggan and Tony Atlas was not a catch-as-catch-can grappling match. It was not technically sound in any way. What this was a hell of a bout of clubbering. We always make fun of Dusty Rhodes' commentary in WCW where he talked about clubbering. This was clubbering, folks. This was two big meaty men slapping meat, to use a 2023 term. So DiBiase and Bourne ran out for immoral support after Duggan got knocked to the outside. The referee went out to see what DiBiase was doing, which led to Bourne getting in the ring. Atlas destroyed Bourne. DiBiase got in, so Atlas destroyed DiBiase. The latter beating of Ted DiBiase caused the referee to take a bump. Duggan put on a loaded mask. It was basically a mask that was cut out like a football helmet. You don't really get a good shot of it because they don't do a whole lot of close-ups on these shows. And most of the matches are just filmed with the single hard camera. So you didn't really get a good shot of it, but it was Duggan putting on a mask that, was cut like a football helmet, and he had a foreign object in the mask, and he used it to spear Atlas. He took the mask off in time for referee Ricky Ferrer to wake up and make the 3 count. So Jim Duggan is still your Louisiana State Heavyweight Wrestling Champion. And by the way, for those who are knowledgeable of this time period, this was also the debut of Bill Watts referring to the 3 of them as the Rat Pack, which is essentially their name. I don't know how long it takes for it to become the official name, but much like how One Man Gang wasn't One Man Gang at first. He was, he didn't have a name until they just eventually decided on One Man Gang. So we'll see how long it takes for Rat Pack to become the Rat Pack's actual name. Up next, Mr. Olympia versus gorgeous Gino Hernandez, the third of our main event matches. Remember last week when we had 0 main event matches and they were basically all just enhancement matches? This week we have 3. And because Gino Hernandez is wrestling, Paul Bosch is here to do commentary. Like I said, I am not a fan. I'm sure others are. But when you're going from bombastic Bill Watts to petrified Paul Bosch, it is a step down in my opinion. So remember how the last match was all clubbering and 0 wrestling? This match began with a heck of a lot of wrestling and 0 clubbering. We had a Greco-Roman knuckle lock where somehow Olympia managed to walk up the ropes and leap off with an arm drag on Gino, which somehow doesn't count as a disqualification, and they tried to explain that because he wasn't coming off the top rope to deliver a direct physical move, then it doesn't count as a disqualification, because when he jumped off the top rope to get momentum to land on his feet to do an arm drag. So that somehow is the logic behind this match being, behind that not being a disqualification for Olympia coming off the top rope. Gino eventually got tired of the grappling and broke out the punch kick to take the advantage. Olympia got heaved out of the ring by Gino, and at this point, an annoying kid came running over, jumped over Olympia to watch Olympia get up off the ground from the other side. Kid, sit your ass back down. Back in the ring, Olympia took back over and used the 2 punches of doom in the corner before he tried a corner charge that Gino sidestepped. Olympia's most consistent offense in this match were roll-ups before slapping on the sleeper, which I assumed was going to be the finish. But alas, Gino wormed his way out of it. And then, to the surprise of many, both the crowd and your humble host of this here podcast, Gino picked up the surprisingly clean win with a suplex and a falling elbow off the middle rope. That was unexpected. And it just goes to show what I've been talking about here since the Loser Leaves Town match from October 27th. You know, Mr. Olympia was a big part of this angle. You know, he was a big part of the Junkyard Dog, Ted DiBiase, Jim Duggan angle, and pretty much has been moved to the back burner ever since that match ended. He was on TV as the Louisiana State champion for weeks, and while it was mentioned, was just kind of ignored. Then you had, whatchamacallit, what the hell am I trying to say here, folks? Then he loses the title off camera. Then he's losing to somebody who's never won a match on TV here before. So something's got to change with Mr. Olympia. And I guess we're going to see here in the next few weeks if anything goes better for him here on the holiday season. So up next, we have Iron Mike Sharp and Tim Horner versus John and Rick Davidson. But as we always point out, if you're going to get Horner, you might as well get Wrestling Horner and not Talking Horner, because we get enough of his bumbling, stumbling ways over on the Smoky Mountain Rewatch Along Project, which you can listen to every single week here on angrybox.com and youtube.com. It's a great program. And the fact is, more people listen to that one than this one, so maybe I should be promoting this show on that show more often. Maybe. So, we talked about earlier, the heels got a win in a non-title, or I'm sorry, the babyfaces got a win in a non-title tag team match. Let's go to Boyd Pierce, who's got a big announcement.
Give me one man from each team before the match starts, but I have a message that has just come down from the wrestling office. The matchmaker has said next week he has made it official. It's all back where it started, because next week the contestants that was in this week's Wild Melee in a non-title match, Mr. Wrestling 2 and Stagger Lee versus Ted DiBiase and Matt Bourne. But next week it'll be for the Mid-South Tag Team title, a championship on the line, one fall, no disqualification, and, Paul, the loser of the fall must leave the Mid-South area. So it's back where it started. At one time it's Ted DiBiase and Matt Bourne against Mr. Wrestling 2 and the Junkyard Dog. But next week it'll be Mr. Wrestling 2 and Stagger Lee. Right now, tag team.
You did say right here on television.
Exactly.
And up in the ring, it is Rick Davidson, who has just been knocked down by Iron Mike Sharp. But that was great news, Boyd Pierce, and I know fans will be pulling up their chairs and leaving them in front of the television set for next week. Tim Horner in.
Please don't leave your chair in front of the TV screen for an entire week. Just put the chair, move the chair back and then bring it back, next week. Because I'll tell you what, if I would have tried to tell my mom back in the day, oh yeah, Mom, I'm going to leave my chair right in front of the TV for the next week, and you can't move it because, I got to make sure it's there in time for the wrestling show next Saturday afternoon. I'd probably, first of all, the chair would be fucking moved. But secondly, I'd probably get a backhand for that one. Not saying it's okay to beat the crap out of kids, just saying that sometimes, kids back in the day were smartasses, and the one way to stop them from being a smartass was, to smack them in the back of the head. Boy, that sounded awful. I should probably edit that out, except, I only edit out when I've got a cold and having a coughing fit. So if you ever listen to a show where I sound super nasally and coughing, and then all of a sudden, for no particular reason, the nasaliness stops, That's because, I had to press pause for a second, hack up a lung, then come back when theoretically I felt better. And I'm sure somebody's going to sit here and say, hey, I've listened to a show where you coughed on air before. And I'm going to say, shut up. Just please shut up. Anywho, so back to the big news because, I went on a Bill Watts style rant there for a second. Next week, Ted DiBiase and Matt Bourne put the tag team titles on the line versus Mr. Wrestling 2 and Stagger Lee in a no disqualification match where the loser of the fall has to leave Mid-South. Say what? Now, we'll get clarification on this next week. However, that was all we heard. The loser of the fall leaves Mid-South. So I read that as, and I don't know if any of y'all are going to read this or read into this, the loser of the fall leaves Mid-South forever. Ever. Now, you wonder who it's going to be. You have Ted DiBiase, who's been here in Mid-South, for a couple of years. We've, seen him here, since the beginning of this show. You have Matt Bourne, who is mostly wrestling out of Georgia and has just come in. You have Mr. Wrestling 2, who also mostly wrestles out of Georgia and just came in. And you have Stagger Lee, who just came in after Junkyard Dog disappeared for 90 days. And we are 2 months into that 3 months. And considering all you have to do is get through next week and some year 1983, and Junkyard Dog's back at the end of the month, maybe Stagger Lee does another job here, and that's the way to write him out and to eventually bring back Junkyard Dog. So we'll see what happens next week. Spoiler alert, there is a finish. Somebody does get pinned, and somebody does have to leave Mid-South. So we'll get into all that next week. By the way, back to the match that, we were talking about. Iron Mike Sharp and Tim Horner versus John and Rick Davidson. Iron Mike Sharp won with a clothesline. There was nothing else to say about it. We then have the big expiration of time match. It is Kelly Kiniski versus Buddy Landell. And Buddy Landell is on his final couple of weeks here on Smoky Mountain Wrestling. So go over to the Smoky Mountain Rewatch Along Project and check that out. And here at the end of the podcast universe, here on this end of the podcast universe, it's Buddy in our expiration of time match. I'm pretty sure Bosch said a 10,000 word sentence in one breath where he talked about how both men are excellent examples of good-looking wrestlers. His commentary was so boring that Boyd interrupted to make a breaking news announcement. Next week, Ted DiBiase and Matt Bourne would wrestle Stagger Lee and Mr. Wrestling 2 in a no disqualification tag team title match where the loser of the fall has to leave Mid-South. Say what? Kiniski used a slash of the hand, which is Bosch speak for a chop. Somehow, Buddy's eyebrow got busted open. Don't even know how the hell that happened. But they exchanged holds and went to the time limit. Boyd, again, because, Paul Bosch is incredibly boring and not saying anything. Boyd again interrupted to make a breaking news announcement that next week Ted DiBiase and Matt Bourne will wrestle Mr. Wrestling 2 and Stagger Lee in a no disqualification tag team title match with the loser of the fall leaving Mid-South. Say what? And yeah, that was it. So that does it for this week's episode of Mid-South Wrestling. This was the second of 3 episodes taped at the same time, because there were because the last week of the month is a best of episode. So instead of doing a separate TV taping just for next week's episode, they did 3 episodes in one. And so the crowd, you can tell while you're watching this, the crowd is burning out. And next week, man, oh man, this crowd really needed a break because this crowd was kind of dead for next week's show. especially considering they give them about 20 minutes downtime between each show. So it's not a 3-hour show, it's a 4-hour show, and not saying that's, not saying it would be much better if there were just 3 straight hours, but I think that would have helped a little bit. I remember when I went to a Ring of Honor TV taping once in Providence when I forget if Cornette was still there or not. But anyway, I did the TV taping where they taped 4 episodes and they did the intermission right in the middle, so after 2 episodes. And honestly, the crowd was dead for, the last week and a half. And I mean, they tried. And I remember thinking there were so many better ways to do that. But, it's obviously not my place to tell wrestling companies 10 years ago how to run their TV tapings. Shockingly enough. So that does it for Mid-South Wrestling. We had a fun show here. We had a good show. We're going to have a newsworthy show next week, that's for sure. And we have a lot of storylines playing out here. We have everything on with Mr. Wrestling 2. We have everything going on with Ted DiBiase trying to get Stagger Lee's mask. He only has until January 27th. Time is running out for Ted DiBiase to prove that it's the Junkyard Dog. And, and then, of course, we have everything linked together. Kamala is now going after masks that he may be being paid off by Ted DiBiase. Akbar is going after the mask, who may also be being paid off by DiBiase to hire Kamala to go after him. And so we've talked about this before, where there may only be 12 to 20 wrestlers in Mid-South on a full-time basis. And they all have their own thing, but they're all interlaced enough like this, where it's like there's one overarching storyline where everybody is somehow playing a part in it. And, it works. It really does work for them. And so, like I said, that does it here for Mid-South Wrestling. Next week is our last episode of 1982. And we're going to end things off with Weird News of the Week. And, of course, that is Weird News of the Week presented by Nobody. The company that sponsors nothing. And for that, we go to UPI.com. We go to our good friend, Ben Hooper, and we go for U.S. Plumber bracing for Brown Friday after Thanksgiving. A plumbing company is warning U.S. residents about Brown Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, which is the busiest of the year for plumbers. Roto-Rooter said Brown Friday marks the busiest day of the year, averaging 50% more calls than the average Friday. Thanksgiving weekend overall averages 21% more calls for service than the average Thursday to Sunday period. The company said the main culprits are clogs in kitchen sinks, toilets, and garbage disposals. Often, the case is that a house has already got a partially clogged drain that goes unnoticed until holiday guests arrive and overwhelm the system, company spokesman Paul Abrams said on the Roto-Rooter's website. Even more problematic is that virtually every traditional Thanksgiving dish is a drain clogging culprit. Roto-Rooter offered some advice for avoiding Thanksgiving weekend plumbing catastrophes, including keeping fats and cooking oils away from the sink, wiping grease out of pots and pans with a paper towel before washing them, and not putting potential clog-causing foods such as poultry skins, celery, fruit, and potato peels down the garbage disposal. Yes, that is the one that I had to read here on the show, which you're listening to a week after Thanksgiving. So that's going to do it for this week's show. So I hope you all enjoyed it. Hope everything is going well. Hope everyone's enjoying this month. Hopefully the weather doesn't suck too bad right now in 2 weeks. And that is our cue to finish things up. Thank you all for listening, and I'll talk to you again in 7 days.